Where do you see the derivatives bubble going? Because there's no way to get rid of that black hole, but they've sold us on this too big to fail, so now they've tied the treasure, the pensions of the entire world to their Ponzi scheme.
Well, and not only that, the financial reform bill, and I loosely use the term reform, it's not a reform bill, but the thing that passed in Congress and was signed by President Obama last summer to supposedly reform the banking system and does absolutely nothing remotely of the sort. It's just very, very many pages of a lot of legal banter back and forth, all of which can have holes poked in it really, really quickly. I mean, I can poke a hole in almost any line in that reform bill without even having a staff of lawyers. But one of the things that it was supposed to do, for example, is create a clearinghouse or a place where derivatives would trade out in the open, would be transparent. But all the loopholes related to that said, well, yeah, we want them to be transparent and trade on clearinghouses, but we forgot to mention that 96% of the clearing activity of the place where these transactions are pen and inked or basically transferred are owned by the top 5 banks in the United States. They're owned by J.P. Morgan. They're owned by Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs owns one of the largest clearinghouses or portion of that in the world.
Nomi, stay there. We're going to come back and continue along that line and ask you the question, where's it all going? Don't forget, right now we're fighting the complete takeover of our energy infrastructure by the insider globalist. The article at Infowars.com, Obama agenda to bankrupt power plants triggers blackouts. Get it out to everybody. Google search term, Obama triggers blackouts. We got to fight back against this. We're talking to Nomi Prins of NomiPrins.com, best-selling author, latest book, It Takes a Pillage, Behind the Bonuses, Bailouts, and Backroom Deals from Washington to Wall Street. Wall Street has been lobbying for domestic police states. They lobby to put dictators in worldwide. They basically, want to secure their ill-gotten gains. They want to make us pay off their derivatives. I was talking to during the break. I mean, you agree that we're basically, by every measurement, really are in a depression?
Yeah, I think we are. And by the measurements that matter to individuals, by the measurements that entail getting jobs or keeping jobs that enable one to afford life, by being able to afford whether it's health care or food or oil or whatever it might be, there's such a chasm between the haves and the have-nots, and that's not been something that hasn't existed in our world before. It's just that more recently, and particularly since the economic crisis spouted in 2008, in the fall of 2008, it's gotten worse. And the reason it's gotten worse is because there's this external veneer of a recovery. There's an external veneer that says, well, the stock market's up. Well, the stock markets across the world are up. GDPs are increasing. And GDPs, by the way, are generally measured, particularly for our country, a substantial measurement has to do with financial services. So the creation of this sort of on-paper wealth drives how we consider our recovery, and other countries consider their recovery to be.
But only the mega bankers are making the record bonuses. The only sector that's showing the big profits is the banksters, because they're the parasite.
They're the parasite. They're those services. They're the purveyor of why markets go up, why profits from corporations go up. It's all related to what happens with the banking sector. I mean, it's the kernel of all of this worldwide, because they all operate worldwide. But on the flip side are people's real economies. On the flip side is not being able to make ends meet. On the flip side is wages being worth less than what they were 35 years ago. So there hasn't been an increase for those people.
You predicted a lot of what happened 6 years ago in your first book because you were an insider. Where do you see things going? Because it's clear they're not going to change course, even if the world's revolting against them. How do you see it ending?
I honestly think it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. When I left the industry and rolled other people's money in 2004, and credit derivatives were a tiny speck on the financial speculation screen, and CDOs were tiny, but they were murky, and they were leverageable, and they were dangerous, and things have gotten more complex and dangerous since then because there's been no opposition. There have been no regulatory barriers to stop the type of financial instruments and financial pillaging that's been going on. It's only gotten worse. But now there's a pretense that it's better. There's a pretense there's financial reform. Stock markets are back up, as we just mentioned, and so forth. So I don't think that gets better. I don't think that changes people's individual economies. I think it's going to get a lot worse, therefore, before it gets better, because after all of what we saw in 2008 globally, after banking systems throughout the world, particularly ours, we're looking at bankruptcy and we're looking at potential collapse and an inability to fund themselves, they all got better. They all got government injections, but the individuals, people in the various countries did not. And that will create a more unstable, less equal set of economies between the banking economy and people's economy for the foreseeable future. So I just see it, unfortunately, getting worse. I wish I saw it differently. But
well, I tend to agree with you, unfortunately. Nomi Prins, stay there. We're going to do 5 more minutes with you on the other side. Coming up, we've got Brad Meltzer of Decoded popping in, and then George Norrie to give us his take on Egypt, the economy, and so much more. Nomi Prins, best-selling author, formerly managing director at Goldman Sachs, joins us, and I want to get her back up in the near future just to talk about Goldman Sachs itself. But I look at Goldman Sachs with all of its people in government giving themselves government bailout. I see them knowingly selling the Timberwolf, telling investors it was great, and then privately laughing at their investors. It's a very piratical worldview, and then they don't get in trouble because it's their people running the SEC. Same with J.P. Morgan and the handful of the other, 5 big super banks. And I was talking about how they are exempt from all their own rules. And you said, yeah, look at the IRS. I mean, it's this inequity and this criminality that they just never get in trouble because they control the government.
Well, exactly, and all of those companies tend to pay less in taxes because they have the accountants, because they know the loopholes, because they are offshore, and a number of different reasons. Whereas, we're just talking about the IRS, audits for the middle class have tripled. Actually, New York Times reported this a few years ago. They had tripled during this last decade for, sort of regular people. I read an article, actually, an alternate recently. It was an old article from 2009 that just made me livid about a single mom with 3 kids who was told by the IRS that she made too much money as a hairdresser at Supercuts, where she made $18,000 a year, and that therefore she couldn't deduct her children who lived with her because she was able to make ends meet on almost nothing. They thought she was hiding something. So, those are the people that get targeted, whereas corporations are paying less and less on a proportional basis of the receipts.
Google pays 2.4% taxes. Some of these big banks work it out because they write the loopholes and get them passed, pay nothing. I mean, and then meanwhile, I'm paying, at the end of the day, they claim it's 35%, but it's more like 40%. They've got it all figured out.
Right, and it's more than that, because if you have expenses, you're going to be treated differently than a corporation is going to be treated. So it's really all figured out, and therefore, it looks like we are in a much worse condition as a country because we are disproportionately trying to suck money out of the people that have it least, and disproportionately allowing those that have it most to keep it. And that's been a problem generally in our economy, and that doesn't even count the trillions of dollars of bailouts that a lot of these financial institutions receive starting in late 2008, without which many might not be in existence today. In
closing, what do we do from your perspective to start countering this and somehow fix it? What are the solutions?
Well, I think one thing is shows like yours is getting information. I think a lot more people who feel disenfranchised and in a negative personal economy are looking for alternative information sources, to know they're not alone and they're not crazy and there's nothing wrong with them. There's actually real policies that are affecting them, and I think that's the start, is that kind of information sharing and that kind of knowledge. And then it's really organizing and getting together and trying to at least make our voices heard. I mean, there's something to be said for what's going on in the square in Egypt right now. And again, there are many reasons for that revolution taking place then, but many of them stem from being screwed by the international capital class and wanting very simple dignity and simple jobs and the ability to make a living.
And clearly, the international capital class is not really free market. It's crony market where they rig the system for themselves like a rigged casino. It's got to end. The problem is they're going to sell us collectivism is the answer, because then they can collect more of our wealth and steal it through government and give it to themselves. Very complex issue. Nomi Prins of NomiPrins.com. We look forward to having you back on to really get into Goldman Sachs itself in the next month or so. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and I'm honored that you're a listener.
Thank you, Alex. Take care.
There goes Nomi Prins, amazing Goldman Sachs insider. We'll have her back very soon to get into Inside Goldman Sachs. We'll be right back. Brad Meltzer's coming up, then George Norrie, and a lot more. Stay with us.